So if you love God, it's because something was revealed to you that you didn't know about. You didn't figure it out on your own. It came to you. It was gift to you. It was revealed to you. Once you understand this, it takes all the pressure off trying to make somebody believe. It takes all the pressure off trying to get someone that you care about to see things exactly your way. This is not your problem. This is God's problem. And He will call that person as you pray and as you consider and as you're kind and as you love. He will call that person to faith. A couple of days ago, I was on an airplane, and Fran and I were seated in one section of the airplane, and Daniel Atkinson, who we were flying with back from New York, was seated in another section, and he told me about this conversation he'd had with a woman sitting next to him, New York to Charlotte. That she was a Christian, she was engaged to a man who was not a Christian, and they were like this. They were all fighting about everything else they agreed except faith. A pretty big issue not to agree on. So she got him to agree to read one of her books. And she presented him with an 800-page document, theological document. You read this, and then you'll see things my way. And he was a more science guy. And he said, okay, I'll read that if you read this. And he gave her a copy of Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species, okay? They're engaged to be married. We're talking about clash of the titans here. Well, Paul says, wait a minute. Those people who love God are called to love Him. And as I said 2 weeks ago, it's like this giant tractor beam that is pulling people deeper and deeper into the heart of God. You can say no anytime you want to, but generally speaking, it is so amazing, so attractive, so delightful to learn about God that your heart goes out to Him. And then he goes on in verse 29 to say things even more amazing. For those whom He foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son, in order that He might be the first fruits, the firstborn among many brothers. And those whom He predestined, He also called. And those whom He called, He also justified. And those whom He justified, He also glorified. Again, Paul's making the case. And any of you who understand your own conversion, if you've had that moment in your life, you know that, yes, you thought about it. Yes, you concluded. Yes, you made a decision. Yes, you said, I do. Yes, you said, I surrender. But that what Paul's saying is there's someone ahead of you, God, that has pulled you into that has opened up your heart. And when you understand that, you're looking at something that is actually too marvelous to understand, too incredible to fathom, that God would take an interest in me. Find me, as I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago, when I was dead in my sins. Not just mostly dead, but dead in my sins. He would find me and make me alive by His own Spirit. And if you have found yourself pulled into that tractor beam, and you're here because you want to know more and more and more, but you have yet to say, I do, then it goes back to you. Why? Why, with the kind of love that God has demonstrated for us, the kind of truth that you've heard here, the kind of worship that you've engaged in, why would you keep saying no to that which has said yes to you for many months or even years? Brothers, sisters, let me tell you the way it is. These things are too marvelous to see. We would not know them unless we were told them. God is tipping His hand here through His Word. He's telling us the way it is. It reminded me, when I thought about this week, it reminded me of an event that happened to me years ago when I was 18 years old. I used to sing with this group and play the guitar with this group that would tour around churches. We went to Texas and California and Arizona and New Mexico and Colorado, and we would set up a band here and we would play in front of churches, and then we would go that night and we'd stay in the homes of people like you, homes of the people in the church. Down in Houston, I stayed in the home of the administrative head of St. Luke's Hospital, St. Luke's Episcopal Hospital. This is where they had a heart center with the famous Dr. Denton Cooley, who was the heart surgeon that perfected open heart surgery and even did heart transplants. We're sitting around dinner one time, and this administrator says to me, "Would you be interested in watching open heart surgery?" "Yeah, sure." He said, "Okay, meet me at the hospital at 2 o'clock. So we go to the hospital at 2 o'clock, and we're escorted into this observation dome where we're looking down. We're not in the room. We're looking down this sort of glass dome area onto the operating theater. And there is a patient laid out, and Dr. Denton Cooley is doing his magic. And there's actually 3 or 4 different observation suites because they're above 3 or 4 different observation or surgical areas. And he goes from this one to that one to this one to that one. And I'm following him, seeing him work, seeing this master of, the surgical master do his work. Now, I saw things that day that brought life. I saw things that day that made people right. I saw things that day that gave people hope. I didn't understand what I saw. All I know is that those men and women on that table have a new chance of life. And what would it have been like if I had stopped and knocked on the window of that observation, said, no, I don't understand what you're doing here. No, you're doing it wrong. No, why don't you start over here? Don't do that, do this. What on earth would I contribute to this amazing, miraculous thing that was taking place before my eyes? That's the awesomeness and the humility that we approach these passages with. Because God is doing something that Peter says in his letter that angels long to look at these things. God is doing something in human hearts of his own making that we just get to see. We don't understand it all, but we see it. We see that it brings life and hope and joy into people's life, and we look back on someone's conversion, upon their agreement that Jesus Christ is Lord, and we say, wow, God did it. They decided yes, but God brought them to that decision. Now that sort of concludes the section of Romans chapter 8, because the next thing that Paul does is he begins to sum everything up. In fact, if you'll look with me at verse 31, you'll see that he starts asking a series of rhetorical questions. There are actually 7 questions. If you count up the question marks in the paragraph, you'll see for yourself. He asks 7 questions. And the first one is this, verse 31. Well, what then shall we say about these things? What then shall we say to these things? What things? Everything that we've been talking about the last 5 weeks. I mean, everything. Going back to the earliest sermon that we talked about, that we live without condemnation. What do you have to say about that? That there is a life for you in the Spirit. That there is a future for you in glory. That you are essentially adopted into the family of God through the work of Jesus Christ on the cross. What do you have to say about that? That all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to the purpose, to his purpose. Well, what do you have to say about that? In other words, aside from all the things that Paul's saying, this is all up to God, who he chooses and who he opens up the heart, it ultimately comes down to a choice that you make, a conclusion that you draw. Friends, what do you have to say about this? These things. What things? The things that God has done. The gift, the offering he's made for you. What do you have to say about these things? Last month, Fran and I came to the conclusion that it was time to replace our air conditioning system. And I got sticker shock when I had the guys come out and tell me how much it would cost to replace 2 systems, upstairs, downstairs. And so I got another opinion, a second opinion, cost about the same amount. I got a third opinion, cost about the same amount. I got a fourth opinion, cost about the same amount. No one was budging on this number that began as a 5-figure number. And at the end of it, we had to sit down and say, well, what do we think about this? You know, we could go maybe another season this fall without a whole lot of air conditioning and see if we can make the old one last and last and last. It's now 22 years old, maybe at 23 years old. We had to come to a conclusion that all the consideration, all the work, all the study, all the comparison had been made. What do you have to say about these things? That question is going to loom over you the rest of today, because I want you to wrestle with it as well. Paul has laid these things out one thing at a time. No condemnation, life in the Spirit, future glory, Abba Father. In all these things, for those who love the Lord and called according to his purpose, all things work together for good. He's laid them all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. And then he said, well, what do you think about these things? What do you say? And to kind of tease us a little bit, he goes to the second question, which is a tremendous question. He said, think of it this way. If God is for us, who can be against us? If the one who made us, the one who loved us, if he's on our side, if he's in our corner, if he has our back, who could be against us? In other words, there is what Paul is saying is there is a heart to God that goes out to you. He is your fan. He's for you. He's got your back. There isn't a thing that can happen to you that is outside of his will. This is a theme in all of Scripture, friends, that God comes alongside of us and encourages us and helps us. In fact, as I thought about this week, I came up with all kinds of passages in the Scripture. For example, I remembered in Acts chapter 7 with the young man Stephen, the first martyr of the church, as he preaches a sermon that is just absolutely beautiful, but it sets the teeth on edge of the people who are listening to it, and they get so angry and they pick up stones. They're going to kill him. And Stephen looks up into heaven and he sees the clouds or the skies part, and he sees the throne of God, and he sees Jesus at the throne, seated next to the throne, but Jesus is not seated at the throne. Jesus is standing next to the throne, not indifferent, not apathetic, but fully engaged in what Stephen is doing. He is essentially applauding Stephen. He says, if God is for us, who can be against us? If this is the kind of love that the Father has for us, in that the Son will stand up for us when we're about ready to come home and welcome us home, who on earth could be against us? We totally, with God on our side, outnumber anybody. Death, disease, divorce, discomfort, suffering, unemployment, any of the situations that go on in our life, and there are so many of them, we outnumber them because God is on our side.
We thank you for joining us online. The ministries of Christ Church Plano are made possible by generous contributions from our members and viewers. If you have found this sermon meaningful and would like to make a gift of support, please visit christchurchplano.org/give. Thank you.